Hi everyone, and welcome to Rex Reviews and my first-ish video. Hi everybody, I'm Rex. I review stuff, like books, TV shows, and movies. I've been doing this sort of stuff for a long time, and I almost have an English degree, so this sort of analysis is kind of a passion of mine. I'm sorry if the setup looks a little funky. Right now you guys are on top of like 4 Norton anthologies and 2 Hunger Games books, so that's where my life is right now. Anyways, today I am going to be reviewing Derry Girls by Lisa McGee. This is a teen sitcom/drama that I enjoy greatly. As a slight disclaimer before I get into the video, I am reviewing this from an American's perspective, so I may not fully understand the full Irish context to the show. I also can't quite use clips or audios from the show due to copyright reasons, not because I don't know how to do it. So yeah, you'll hear me read lines aloud in my British American accent. I apologize about that, and I will try to use screenshots from the show. That being said, thank you for listening, and let's get rolling. So for the first thing I should probably do for you guys, at least for those of you who don't know, is explain to you what is Derry Girls. So the plot itself is actually fairly simple. This is a teen sitcom/drama following a group of teenage girls in high school, or whatever the equivalent is called over on the other side of the pond, during a troubling time in life. This both dealing with the external troubles of the Irish Civil War that is occurring, also known as the Troubles, and their own personal troubles. This takes place in a small town called Derry, or Londonderry, depending on your persuasion, a small town in Northern Ireland in the late 90s at the tail end of the Troubles, a civil conflict that had been going on for roughly 3 decades at that point. That makes it sound very depressing, but it is actually very incredibly funny. It's probably one of the funniest shows I've ever seen without it being like too over the top while still dealing with serious issues. It follows 4 girls, Erin Quinn, Orla McCool, who are cousins, Claire Devlin, and Michelle Mellon, and a wee English fella named James McGuire, who is Michelle's cousin. They're all very different from one another, but all equally complex and well developed. They don't really fall into one like specific stereotype. They're all very, very, like I said, complex characters, and that you don't really see a lot in teen-aimed shows. And despite their different interests and many differences, they are still very tightly knit and good friends. Now, the next question I'm going to answer that you're probably asking is, what is the appeal? Why do people like this teenage sitcom drama? They're usually not that great. Talking about Riverdale and stuff here. Sorry, I don't mean to slam your shows. I just say shit. Okay, so back to what I'm trying to say. I'm going to get into some personal stuff here. Not like super personal, but like a bit personal. I watched the show during its runtime from ages like 16-ish to 19-ish, which is ish age range of the characters. I think it follows them from like 15 to 18. And honestly, it was probably the only teen show that I enjoyed. My mom and I would actually watch it together frequently, like all the time. The 90s setting reminded her of her teenage years and in that era, and she had her own Irish family, actually. I enjoyed it because it was actually relatable to me, unlike so many of the other crap teenage shows that were pushed on us at that time. And actually at one point my mom and I were even planning on going to Derry when they were filming the final season, but we couldn't because of COVID. That was fun. Anyways, I was able to connect deeply with the characters because they felt so natural, and I felt and saw a genuine connection in them. They face the same awkwardness and discomfort that comes with being a teenager, but the same like joys and exhilaration that comes with being that age. There's a plane, sorry if you can hear that in the background. Anyways, more about the appeal is that the characters are like colorful and well-rounded. Even the side characters like Sister Michael, who is probably like one of the baddest bitches ever. I won't do a full character analysis in this video, but I might do it in another one. The story is fast-paced, deeply profound, and just very, very funny. It deals with things teenagers experience and growing up. Like the concept of growing up and getting older. This also includes like sexuality, relationships, experimenting with drugs and alcohol in a very realistic and sort of awkward manner that comes with like being a real teenager. Even with topics of sexuality, the characters are not over-sexualized, and it's approached with a sort of nervous attitude that I think many teenagers can relate to, unless of course you're Michelle. Then it's no big deal. It deals with situations that people deal with that are realistic yet absurd at the same time, and it's just so normal. In this time of teen dramas full of murder mysteries, supernatural elements, intense drugs, alcohol, and sex use, these teens are just so normal. They're so regular. Many of these teen shows, the adults are cast as teenagers, and while Derry Girls does the same thing, these actors emulate teenhood very well. Their hair is messy, their skin is flawed, they don't wear full glam makeup and glam outfits every day. Nobody is a secret werewolf or a witch or something. And now, I'm not saying I don't like supernatural shows. I do like supernatural shows. It's just sometimes you want some normalcy, especially when you're an awkward teenager trying to find something to relate to when all the other teen shows are like these super popular, super hot people, and you just want to feel normal. That was my own side tangent. And they wear clothes that are normal within their age range. There's actually a scene where Erin tries to wear like a skin-tight dress, and I'm not body shaming the actress here at all. She's gorgeous, but the dress doesn't fit her very well. It fits her awkwardly, and she acts awkwardly in it, as in the character, not the actress, because in the show, she's a teenager. She doesn't know how to wear an adult that is like tailored and meant for like a fully developed adult woman. Characters act like teenagers. They are weird and chaotic and stressed out about school and homework. The main characters aren't very popular. They're kind of geeky dorks, which is very relatable to me. I mean, look at what I'm doing here. Well, they were very beautiful. They're still like a normal, achievable beauty to them. Personally, I found the characters incredibly relatable. Like I said, I was around that age of the characters when the show was running. The way they acted, dressed, and looked was just so real to me. I was awkward, dorky, and unpopular. I fit in with them. I didn't do much partying or dating. I didn't do any drinking or drugs, and when the topic was brought up, I got panicked, very similar to some of these characters in this show. But in a time when these actions are romanticized and idealized to teenagers, Derry Girls treats them in a very realistic way. Some teenagers don't do these things, or do them very rarely, except for Michelle. Also, just has an amazing soundtrack. The soundtrack box, it is fantastic. I highly recommend it, just for the soundtrack. I have tried to film this 3 times now, so hopefully the third time's a charm, right? Here we go. So, the humor of Derry Girls. Derry Girls has a very quick-witted and quite frankly absurd sense of humor. And when I say absurd, I mean it has a way of taking these very normal, average, mundane experiences and then just heightening them to the extreme. Derry Girls is one of the only teenage sitcoms that I've seen that actually highlights how stupid and absurd teenagers are. And again, that was something I found very relatable as a teenager, because as a teenager, everything feels like such a big deal. So it takes these mundane moments and puts them into the worst case scenario, and everything still works out in the end. I sadly cannot go over every episode from each season, even though I would love to. This video is already going to be incredibly long, so I am going to pick one scenario from each season and then just yap about it for a few minutes. Alright, so, Season 1, Episode 1. Right off the bat, they kill a nun. Okay, so they don't really kill her. The group is put in detention because they were bullying a first year. One of them was. Michelle was bullying her. The rest were just kind of standing on the sidelines. Anyway, so the group is put in detention. Erin's diary is taken because Orla is reading it for a book report. And the nun also takes Michelle's lipstick because Michelle is putting it on in detention, and that's a no, apparently. Claire is starving because she's doing a fast for charity. James really has to pee because he won't use the girls' bathroom because it's an all-girls school and he's not allowed to use the male staff lavatories. The nun dies while reading Erin's diary, likely of a heart attack, and just chaos breaks loose. Erin is sneaking out the window to go to a gig. Michelle is looking for her lipstick in the nun's handbag. Claire is eating the sandwich the nun had, and James is peeing into a trash can in the corner. That's a lot happening. That's a big thing. And let's see, Orla, picks up the head of the nun and is like, it's funny how she sleeps with her eyes wide open. And then, their headmaster comes in and sees everything that's going on. Their parents get called, and the girls are accused of murdering the nun. And I quote, pissing on her dead body and eating sandwiches. Argument breaks out. They talk about getting lawyers involved. Grandpa Joe says that the nun was struck down in her prime, and she was 98 years old. And then, they're fighting, and then the episode just ends. They don't follow up. We don't know what happens after that. We don't know what kind of, punishment they came to for the girls. It just moves on. It's kind of what I love about Derry Girls, is that it just has these, big, absurd, over-the-top moments, and then they just move on. I love it. Alright. Season 2, Episode 3. There is a concert in Belfast, and Jerry, Erin's father, was going to take the group to the concert. But a polar bear escapes from the Belfast Zoo, meaning they can't go. So they sneak out and try to walk. I mean, they don't initially try to walk, they try to take the bus. But they need to ditch the bus because Michelle brought a suitcase full of vodka, and it is assumed to be a bomb because she won't own up to being the owner of the suitcase. So, they leave the bus, their suitcase gets blown up, as does all of their vodka. Then they try to walk to the concert. They try to walk from Derry to Belfast, and they get picked up by this really weird lady who is drinking and driving and planning on selling misspelled bootleg t-shirts at the concert. Okay, stick with me, please. While she is drinking and driving, she hits sheep, and Orla pokes her head out the window and says, I see him! I see the polar bear! But they just see a bunch of sheep, and everyone is like, oh, that's just Orla being Orla. So they have to move the sheep, out of the road, and then they realize that they don't have James with him because they forgot him with the Irish Travelers. He has the tickets. So they turn around and go get him, and then we're also getting scenes of what's happening back in Derry with their families while the girls have snuck off. We find out that Grandpa Joe's friend would shoot hippies with a crossbow in the 70s. And then, later they get a news broadcast update that the polar bear has been found feasting on a sheep by the side of the road, meaning that very likely Orla did see the polar bear, and people just thought she meant the sheep because they're white and fluffy. And then, during this news broadcast, the concert also gets TV televised, and Jerry is sitting on the couch while everyone else is arguing because they realize that the girls snuck out, and he sees them on TV, and again, they just move on. I don't know if he tells them, I assume he doesn't, and we don't even know how they got home. It's hilarious. Season 3, Episode 5. This one does not actually focus on the girls, but their mothers, so that would be Mary McCool, whose married name is Mary Quinn, so Erin's mom, Sarah McCool, Orla's mom, Geraldine, we don't know her maiden name, that is Claire's mom, and Deirdre, we also don't know her maiden name, but that is Michelle's mom and James's aunt, and their now ex-friend, Jeanette, who is the mother of Jenny, who is the rival of their daughters. Stick with me, you can do this, you can do it, I swear. So the episode has 2 timelines, the Leavers Ball back in the 70s and the modern day reunion set in the 90s. During this time, we found out that the mothers have this deep, dark secret of what happened that night, and it's something that will ruin their lives. So Mary tries to confront their ex-friend Jeanette because they had a falling out, and Mary essentially blackmails her with the thing that happened that night, and eventually Jeanette snaps. She can't take it anymore, so she runs off into the woods, and she decides she needs to reveal the secret and everybody else's secret, and she starts digging up this old time capsule, and we find out that this big, dark secret that can potentially ruin their lives is the fact that they have matching tattoos given to them by Deirdre from a tattoo machine she bought from a magazine, I think. Also, we find out that she dug up the wrong box. This was such a common whatever thing that multiple people did it at this school. They find out that oh yeah, your tattoos aren't a big deal. I mean, you did them kind of illegally, but also it's been 30-something years. And then they just move on. Again, I just love this style of humor where it takes these big, absurd moments, just so over the top, and they seem like everything's falling apart and then it just moves on. And I think I found that very comforting as a teenager because I struggled a lot with anxiety back then. I still do now, but it was worse back then because of all like the hormones and stuff. And it felt so good, and I felt so much better seeing these like disastrous moments presented in like a humorous way, and also things just worked out in the end. I really liked that and needed that, and I think that's the style of humor that I really appreciated as a teenager, and I feel like a lot of teenagers could appreciate. Overall, Derry Girls is about growing up, all the aches and pains that come with getting older. It follows these girls finding themselves, their awkward relationships, and what it's like to grow up in a troubled time, which I think a lot of us can relate to. When I was watching the show as a teenager, I felt a strong sense of empathy for the characters. No, I didn't grow up in Northern Ireland or during a civil war. However, I was a teenager in a politically turbulent time, so I was able to relate greatly to these characters. That being said, they still discover themselves, have fun, and grow as people, despite everything that is happening around them. Derry Girls handled sexuality and coming out very well, in my opinion. I think one of my favorite things in this show was how they handled these topics. They had a very diverse spectrum of people exploring their sexuality. They had Michelle, who was very interested in this subject and had a lot of experience, but she was never shamed or ridiculed for her relationships by her friends. Erin, who was interested in relationships, but always got flustered and nervous and never got very far into relationships. She would get teased about this, but it was never a huge deal, really. I also really enjoyed the show because Erin and Michelle end up flirting with older adult men, and these older adult men both reject them because these girls are teenagers. Unlike some teen dramas, such as Pretty Little Liars, where that seems to be romanticized. This is not shaming girls and women who have been taken advantage of by older men. This is saying that TV shows should not romanticize the relationships between adult men and teenagers. This also goes for adult women and teenagers. Then there is James, who is the same as Erin, who was interested in relationships but never got very far because he got awkward and flustered and nervous. There's Orla, who never really appeared to be interested in a relationship, and there is Claire, who is a lesbian. I love how they handled Claire's coming out. At first, Claire was scared to come out, justifiably so. She was actually sort of forced to come out, which wasn't great. That is never a good thing to happen. This is when her anonymous essay got published by Erin, who was unaware that Claire wrote this essay. She did not do this intentionally to hurt Claire. This was just the most interesting essay they got, and she was like, put it in the school newspaper. This leads Claire to coming out to Erin, to which Erin says, don't come out, go back in. Claire responds, I don't want to go back in. Erin says, look, I'm just not interested in you like that. Claire responds with the iconic line that has been all over TikTok recently, not interested in you like that, look at the state of you. Eventually, Erin and Claire resolve their issues. Claire is an out lesbian, not only to her friends, but her family and her friends' families, and they are all very supportive of her. I know this is idealized, but I thought, especially as a teenager, as a queer teenager, I thought this was very nice. I loved seeing her being supported, and I loved that it wasn't made into like a, shh, keep it quiet, you're so gross, and that her family didn't reject her. And after Claire comes out, all of her friends wear like little rainbow pins on their jackets or their ties or something. I thought that was very sweet. One of the main characters is neurodivergent. It's not stated directly or even given a diagnosis, but it is evident. This character is Orla. Orla does her own thing. While she goes along with her friends on their adventures, she still has her own way of doing things. She struggles with societal norms. For example, in the first episode, she brings Erin's private journal, claiming that she needs it because she is doing a book report on it. Orla misses certain social cues and references. For example, the priest says we should take this to the big man in Italy, which Orla says, Pavarotti? And her uncle corrects her by telling her John Paul II, the Pope at the time. Orla is teased about this by her friends. At one point, Erin even calls Orla mental, but her friends are fiercely protective of her. At one point, during the school talent show, Orla decided to do her step aerobics routine. Step aerobics is very important to Orla. She practices it constantly. To her, this is a very special talent that she wants to show to the school, which I thought was incredible, by the way. Of course, her fellow classmates find this funny, laugh at her, and ridicule her. Even end up calling her a dick. Erin stands up for her and says, she's my dick. Claire also stands up and says, no, she's our dick. Her friends join in on her in the step aerobics. Of course, Orla doesn't mind this. Even if her friends didn't defend her or join her on stage, she would have kept going, because this is important to her. There are two characters who are similar to this. Orla's mother, Sarah, who is very interested in fashion and shares similar traits of missing social cues, such as their daughter, and their uncle Colin, who goes on long rambles that appear very flat and boring, frequently going off track without noticing how people want to leave the conversation. But honestly, I found all of his stories very entertaining. You just had to wait for the payoff. Orla is still intelligent. She's not dumb. She's a smart person. She even gets the same grades as her cousin Erin on their final exams. And as a different teenager, I found that just so comforting, that she could just be herself without allowing anyone to ridicule her or let it get to her. I just found that incredible. Derry Girls also has a great way of handling the topic of gender roles. One of the main characters, James, goes through this amazing character arc when it comes to his relationship with feminism. So, in the beginning, James is sent to an all-girls school due to serious concerns about his safety because he is English. During this, James is confronted with a rather awkward and uncomfortable experience being the only boy in a group of girls. Also, shout out to all of the boys who were the only boy in a group of girls. I had a few friends like that. I feel you. I see you. I love you. You are doing fantastic. Like I said, I've had a few friends who were the only boy in a girls' group. And from my perspective, Derry Girls handles this very well. They are comfortable with James. They talk openly about stuff with him, and they tease him about being a boy. For example, I wrote an episode, but I'll put it here. They're like, oh yeah, Claire, we can totally find you a girl. We can pick one up for you. And James is like, can you guys pick one up for me too? And they're also scandalized, like, you can't just pick up a girl. It was hilarious. But overall, they love him. In season 1, James is frequently called a girl when he is in the group. They say girls or ladies, and James is kind of insulted every time he is called a girl or compared to femininity, and refuses to use the girls' bathroom at the school. These are the only student bathrooms at the school. It's understandable. You don't want to be misgendered. It's not a fun experience, even if you are cisgender. James is still wary of femininity and is still not very comfortable with being feminine. In the first episode of season 2, James tries to make some friends with more boys. He's not sure how to do this, so he makes references to beer, football, and tits, which makes the other boys very uncomfortable. In season 2, after the influence from one of his female teachers, Miss De Bruyne, he starts to embrace femininity more and starts to emulate her by wearing makeup and using the girls' bathroom. I also think he starts using the girls' bathroom because he had an unfortunate experience with peeing in a trash can. So using the bathroom probably doesn't have so much to do with his femininity, but to do with the fact that he doesn't want to pee in trash cans anymore. And in the last episode of season 2, James has to make a choice. Go back to London with his mother, or stay in Derry with his cousin and his only friends. Michelle, his cousin, tries to get him to stay by stating, you're one of us now. It doesn't matter if your bits are different from my bits, because being a Derry girl is a state of mind. James scoffs this off, but he returns, loudly and proudly shouting to the crowd that he is a Derry girl. In the last season, James is far more comfortable displaying femininity. He still reminds people that he is actually a boy when he is referred to as a girl or a lady, but he does it less often by now. In this season, James takes a massive leap. He dresses up as Posh Spice for a school talent show and rocks it. And he does this performing in front of the entire school with no complaints. No one makes fun of him for dressing up as Posh Spice either. James shows comfort with both masculinity and femininity. Derry Girls doesn't explore masculine traits in girls as much, I didn't see, at least, because I also feel like that's much more accepted and normalized. However, there is a good line. In season 1, episode 2, they are starting to find jobs so they can take a trip to Paris, and Erin says Orla should take a gardening job because it requires muscle. And James says that he should do it because it's a man. And Michelle is like, well, that's debatable. And he says, well, I'm more of a man than Orla. And Orla is deeply offended by this. And she says, I do not accept that. I just thought was, again, very relatable and funny, but also, true. I definitely felt Orla in that scene. Lastly is the theme of growing up. These characters grow up and change and learn how to function in the world. They are not perfect, they are stupid, and they are assholes sometimes. I know I was stupid and an asshole when I was a teenager. I was even a stupid asshole. But they grow up and they change, and they learn to be individuals on their own. There's this great kind of motif through the series, I think, with this denim jacket. In the first episode, Erin's putting on a denim jacket over her uniform, and she's like, I'm being an individual this year, and her mom won't let her. So she puts her blazer back on, and she meets Claire at the bus stop, who is also wearing a denim jacket, and they're both loose-fitting and don't fit them very well because they're teenagers, they're kids. When Claire sees Erin without the denim jacket, she's like, well, I'm not being an individual on my own, and she takes off the denim jacket and stuffs it in her backpack. Later, in the final episode, when they're leaving the polling station, Erin is putting on her denim jacket, and it looks similar to the one in the first episode, but much more well-fitting, and it shows how much she has grown up, and I'm getting a little teary-eyed. And I have one more thing to say before I finish this. Erin's final monologue in Derry Girls. Oh my goodness, this still makes me cry years later. When asked about growing up, she says, maybe a wee bit scary too, you know? There's a part of me that wishes everything could just stay the same, that we could all just stay like this forever. There's a part of me that doesn't really want to grow up. I'm not sure if I'm ready for it. I'm not sure if I'm ready for the world. But things can't stay the same, and they shouldn't. No matter how scary it is, we have to move on, and we have to grow up, because things, they might just change for the better. So we have to be brave. And if our dreams get broken along the way, we have to make new ones from the pieces. As you can see, this still has a very deep emotional effect on me. This was probably one of the most profound monologues or speeches I have ever heard from a teen sitcom drama that is mostly a comedy. And Lisa McGee had such a wonderful way of encapsulating what it meant to be a teenager and what it meant to grow up. Derry Girls truly was an ode to teenhood.